Hey, everybody, this is Bob Goodwin, president of Career Club, and welcome to another episode of Career Club Live. Please check out Career Club, where we're bringing sales and marketing techniques and processes to help people find a career that matters to them. If you are someone who is in job search right now, we would love to work with you. If you are an employer, and the times that we find ourselves in these days with layoffs and other types of staffing decisions, we can help there as well. So please check us out at career.club. Also, I'd encourage you to follow me on LinkedIn and follow Career Club. We are publishing content every day to help you in your career. So please follow me and follow Career Club. I'd like to thank my colleague, Joey, who makes all of this happen. So Joey, thank you so much for that. So with that, I would like to welcome today's guest, Brian Choi. Brian is the president of the Food Institute, a 90-year-old fixture in all things food and beverage and the go-to resource for professionals, whether they're brands or retailers in the food and beverage industry. So with that, Brian, welcome.
Thanks, Bob. Glad to be on and look forward to our conversation today.
No, absolutely. We're super pleased to have you on. I know that we met through our common friend, Hunter Thurman, and
right.
Alpha Divers. So that was a great connection and one I'm really glad he made for us.
Yeah, I'm glad that we're connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So as is our habit here on Career Club Live, we do a little bit of an icebreaker so folks can get to know you a little bit better. So 5 easy questions, starting off with, where were you born and raised?
Most people don't know this, but I was born and raised in Canada, in Alberta. That's until about 10. And then after that, I spent about 10 years in Vancouver, Canada, where I went to school, graduated from the University of British Columbia with a finance degree.
Beautiful, beautiful part of the world, isn't it?
Beautiful, beautiful. Can't recommend that place enough if you have a family and you want to just go for great food, great nature, hiking, all of that kind of stuff.
All true. And you already answered the second question about school. So there's that. Tell us a little bit about your family, Brian.
So I am from Korean descent. So I'm a second generation Korean. So my parents came from Seoul, Korea. Both of them were highly educated. My mother was a pharmacist. My father was a lawyer. They left everything to start a new life in Canada. And so, so really kind of grew up in that immigrant family, hard work ethic. My dad worked 3 jobs when he came over. And so having been a part of that sort of family culture really instilled, in me, the dedication to work. It's been great. It's been great. And that's how, that's a little bit about my family. I am married. My wife is Korean. I met her actually in New York during my investment banking and finance days. And so we met in New York. We got married in California, and we have 2 beautiful children: 8-year-old son Brandon and 2-year-old Debbie. So
that is awesome. Yeah. That's very cool. Little kids are fun. So I'm gonna switch the questions around for half a second then, because I think I might know the answer to this one. So what are you doing when you're not at the Food Institute, making the world more knowledgeable about the industry?
Yeah, well, with 2 small kids, there's really a lot of limits to what you can do. But most of the time it's just hanging out with kids, going out to theme parks. My son is a big, he's a big Lego fan. So, we go to, the Lego land and things like that. But it's really focused around family time. And then outside of that, I'm involved in my church. And so get involved in kind of faith-based sort of like activities as well.
No, that's awesome. Well, I figured that with the age of your kids, the answer to what do you do when you're not at work was going to be too late. You alluded to investment banking. And yes. I know that later in our conversation, we're going to get into a little bit more of that. But do you mind giving folks just sort of the aerial overview of your career?
Sure. So I started right after I graduated. I started at Goldman Sachs in New York. So I was part of their investment banking capital markets groups. I focused at that time in the financial institutions group. And then my boss left to go from from Goldman to Lehman Brothers, where I followed him. And did focused on financial strategy. So we really helped Fortune 500, primarily food and beverage companies, think about valuation, financial strategy, those types of concepts. And I spent about 5 years after that in consulting, and another 3 years in private equity. So really kind of spans, I'm sure we'll get into more details about that, but, having investment banking and consulting and private equity and now running a media company, I definitely do not have a traditional path compared to most folks.
Well, maybe we can use that, though, as the segue into the Food Institute. So
Sure.
maybe a good place to start is how you discovered the Food Institute, what your relationship is with the Food Institute, and then for folks who are not familiar, maybe just a little bit about the mission and vision for
Sure.
the Food Institute.
So as you mentioned, Food Institute is a 90-plus-year-old organization. So it started in 1928. So if you kind of think, that's right about when the Great Depression happened, right? Mm-hmm. And so the founder at the time built a publication to help inform folks in the food industry about market trends, about market pricing, and developed a very reputable weekly news publication that he would mail out to his constituents. Mm-hmm. And that mission really hasn't changed in the 90 plus history. And so how I got involved is during my private equity days. So I focused on lower middle market acquisitions of food and beverage companies in the US. I would always be on the hunt for quality information, unbiased information, and Food Institute was one of the few places that I would go where I could rely upon that information that they provided, whether it's news, insights, reports. And having been a subscriber for a number of years, 2 years before I came on board, I approached the management of the Food Institute and told them about a number of ideas that I think would help the company. So this wasn't really me wanting to acquire it at the time. It was just presenting ideas. And what normally happens is the case is when an external party has some advice for management, it normally gets chucked away to the side, which is what happened. And funny story, I finally found out who the owners were. So one was a high net worth individual working in private equity, and the other owner was a food service, managing one of the leading food service distribution companies in the US. So I actually reached out to them on LinkedIn. I pestered them probably for about 3 months until they answered, replied to my message. And once I got a hold of the majority owner, I told them what I wanted to do with the company. And so, fast forward 3 months, we worked out a deal, and the rest is history. So I took over at the beginning of 2020. So it's been a phenomenal ride.
I think it's very cool, though, that it wasn't, oh, here's a cool financial play. It's like, no, I'm actually a consumer of the content that these folks put out, and in fact, I'm such a fan of it. Maybe this is actually what I want to do. So I can't think of a better endorsement. That's the ultimate subscriber. You bought the company.
Yeah, exactly. And, I kind of realized through my different roles in finance how important information is, right? So a lot of the content that we get, whether it's on, the CNNs and the Fox News, it's very politicized. There seems to be an agenda in many cases. And so to be able to work at a company where I believe that the value of content should be unbiased, well-balanced, right? And informative, you would think that this should be a no-brainer for any media company, but I realize that there is a lack of that type of content, and that's really what I wanted Food Institute to become. And the phrase "the Bloomberg of the food industry" is kind of the phrase that I would use, because relative to other media organizations, I felt that Bloomberg really focused on the facts, on the data. And they really didn't go into the political side, or the agenda side of, that many other media organizations focus on. So that's really the vision. And it's been 3 years. I love it. This is the best job that I've ever had, in my 20 plus year, career history. And, every day brings something new and innovative. So, yeah.
Now that's awesome. And then maybe just again, very quickly, and I'm not trying to make this an infomercial. We're gonna talk issues and content stuff in just a second. But how do people access the content, and is that changing over time in how the content's delivered to folks?
Yeah. So 3 years ago, we switched strategy. So instead of being focused as a print publication, we completely digitized the business. So now we have newsletters, we have podcasts, we have digital video, we have webinars, we have a free newsletter which you can sign up if you go on the homepage of foodinstitute.com. And there are also different professional memberships available as well. And so as members or even as sponsors, they are able to help shape the content, but not in a way that is either misleading or trying to push an agenda. They believe in the content of Food Institute, and so it's for them to be able to reach our audience, which is primarily focused on food and beverage companies, lower to upper middle market, and many of whom are founder, operators, C-suite level executives.
Yeah, that's super cool. So let's jump into the real talking shop part about this. Is a major theme. Just it's across almost every news outlet these days is inflation and recession.
Right.
And something that we read about in the news, biased or not, is consumers are struggling with inflation, and food is a major driver. I was reading about eggs the other day, and just how crazy the price is on eggs, and it's affected a lot of categories. As you think about that, where do you guys see that headed? And I was hoping maybe we could kind of break it down. We don't have to, so it's not one giant question, but just sort of setting the table, no pun intended, for kind of inflation, recession from a consumer sentiment perspective,
right,
from a manufacturer brand perspective, and then from a retail perspective. So I'll let you pick the thread up.
Yeah. So, the way I look at inflation, I don't really look at it from like a quarter to quarter or even on a monthly. Like I keep an eye on that, but I kind of take a step back and say, what is really driving inflation today? So there are a number of factors, right? So one, when you take a look at monetary policy and even fiscal policy, and I'll kind of use the great financial crisis as a starting point, right? What was significant back then in 2008 is the government started to experiment with the balance sheet in a way that historically they never have, right? So when you remember the great big bazooka that they during the at that time it was like almost $1 billion, right? And everyone was like, oh my goodness, like what are we doing? But since then, look what has happened, right? Since COVID, we started trillions of dollars are going into the economy, right? And this has never happened. So the amount of money that's been pumped into the system is really a underlying driver of inflation, right? So, people like to use helicopter money, as a term. And that's really, really what has happened. There's so much money sloshing around in the economy. And when you take a look at since 2008, up until COVID, it's been, you look at inflation, it's like target 2%, right? And normally, my view is that when there's so much experimentation in kind of fiscal and monetary policy, eventually there's going to be a downfall, or the effects, the ramifications of that are going to play out. And so that's what we're seeing today, right? We're seeing the effects of experimental fiscal and monetary policy. Obviously, COVID was a big driver as well, right? It basically stopped the economy. And once the economy started roaring back, consumers started buying like there was no tomorrow, right? They were buying everything, right? They were buying cars, and they were, all that money that went, that the government pumped in to shore up, consumers' wallets, like they spent it on everything, right? And so the economy wasn't prepared for that amount of demand, right? So, so going back to your question specifically on consumers still are purchasing, very aggressively, and even in places like China, you're starting to see even kind of a global demand from the consumer that's pushing, the supply in a way that's driving up prices, right? And so my view is that this is not a temporary phenomenon, right? I think at least in this next season, and when I say the season, over the next 3 to 5 and maybe even 10 years, we will be at elevated inflation, especially in the food sector. Now, I'm hoping that eventually it comes back down, but we're in a new era of elevated inflation, so the consumer will be affected. Grocery bills are $100 for a family of four, $100 more than what they bought previously in pre-COVID, right? So the consumer is tight strapped right now. The economy, especially with the economy starting to slow down. Many economists are predicting some sort of like a recession. Now, depending on how severe it is, it might happen in the back half of this year. So it's sort of like two big events. You have inflation and you have a slowing economy, right? And a lot of jobs have been lost, since the beginning of the year, especially on the tech sector. So I do think these two themes will continue throughout the next couple of years. And, I'm hoping, there won't be another war or, escalation of war, whether it's in Ukraine, Russia, or other parts of the world. But, that's how I see the world today. It's sort of like slow growth, potentially a recession, and elevated inflation across the board.
Right. So if people were rational, then what you would do at that point is you would say, gosh, with all this uncertainty, higher prices, I'm going to trade down, and I'm just going to be a very economic, driven machine, right? And I'm going to make very, very rational decisions. The interesting thing is food is highly emotional. Food and beverage is highly emotional. And, I referenced our mutual friend Hunter earlier, but, one of the things he talks about is, like it's not quite as rational as we want to believe.
Right.
And so, coming out of COVID and all the stress that people have been under for, 3+ years or 3 years, almost 3 years with that, and economic uncertainty and everything else, food is actually something that makes us feel good. It helps us actually kind of cope, right? And sometimes it's a treat yourself kind of thing, and, but it's a simple pleasure, right?
That's right.
And so I wonder if you could sort of talk about that side of the equation.
Yeah. So obviously the emotional part, I think, is much more at play now than it was pre-COVID. We've seen, and we could talk about this later, is we've studied consumer behavior in the snacking sector.
Yeah.
Right. So we actually partnered with Mondelez on a report studying the snacking behavior across the past, from 2013 to 2021. And what we found is that snacking behavior, as you alluded to, is up significantly, right? So the penetration of consumers actually snacking on a global level went from 78% to 86%, right? So that's on the at the first level. The second is the average snacks went from 3.1 to 3.3, about an 8% rise. And that's driven by, a lot of it is driven by the fact that food makes us feel good, right? People are spending more time at home, right? So there's a lot more food at home than there is at the workplace. So the number of snacking occasions has increased significantly, since a lot of companies, they still have a hybrid, or even in some cases a completely virtual work environment. And that's where Food Institute, we're completely virtual. So I'm working from home, 5 days a week, and there's a fridge literally 2 feet away from me, right? And whenever I'm stressed, I go to the fridge and I'm eating, right? But there's a balance there. So it's not only about the emotional factor. It's also, I recognize that I need to eat healthy too, right? And so there is a gravitation towards eating healthy, less processed, lower sodium. So in my mindset, and I think a lot of consumers' mindsets, they recognize that, and they're gravitating towards healthier or functional types of foods. And that's where a lot of the CPG manufacturers, they've recognized that and are shifting their product portfolios to satisfy both the health component, but also the mindful indulgence side of snacking as well. So, we could delve more into that, but I'll pause there to see if you have any additional
No.
thoughts.
I think that's right. Having said that, so I'm going to kind of argue both sides of the case that there is, though, trading down
That's
going
correct.
on too, right? Because the reality is most people have, a almost a chip allocation, right? I've only
Right.
got 100 cents in a dollar. And as
Right.
these things start going up, we have to make choices on things. And, do we always need the premium version or the whatever the most expensive version is?
Right.
And sometimes we trade down. And again, our topics are all going to kind of mix together because this isn't single factor kind of stuff. It all
Right.
works together. You look at private label in
Right.
retail, for
Right.
example, and there's been tons of innovation. I mean, Kroger does a great job with that. You've got Trader Joe's and Aldi,
Right.
Costco, clearly. I mean, there's a lot of retailers that are doing private label really well.
Right.
And so, air quote, trading down
Right.
doesn't really even feel like trading down sometimes.
Exactly. And because the quality of, there's an Aldi literally 5-minute drive away from me, and they
Yep.
just opened up about 12 months ago. And so, but also within the same vicinity, there is a Wegmans, there
Yeah.
is a Whole Foods. And you're right. The Aldis, the Lidls of the world, they're providing product that are as good, as high quality as some of the brand names out there, right? And so the stigma with private label, I think, has pretty much been eroded at this moment. Even even Trader Joe's, their quality of the product is really good. In many cases, at half the cost of some of the leading other retailers and brands out there. So there is that trading down because consumers, like you said, don't feel like they're trading down, right? And cost and price control is the key driver.
Yep. So let's just sort of double down on CPGs for a minute. You talked earlier in your career that you were focusing, kind of in that middle market, even
Right.
lower middle market. Having worked a lot with private equity and VCs
Right.
in my last role at Numerator, that's where all the deal activity was, and trying to find, kind of hidden gems,
Right.
in that middle market, lower middle market. It's really hard,
It's
but
really hard.
there is a lot of innovation going
Correct.
on in those
Right.
sectors, and you've got founders who are really passionate about, to your earlier point, better for you, functional, whatever the benefits are, and
Right.
doing a lot of innovation where the big guys are either following or just acquiring, and that's their innovation strategy. It's
Right.
just acquire somebody that's gotten to enough critical mass or some big enough pain in the rear end to say,
Right.
well, let's buy these guys.
That's correct. And what's interesting, I think, is you're right. In a lot of the big CPG companies, they've lagged behind the innovation because the process of innovation, the time to like a go-to-market strategy has shortened considerably, right? With data out there, and like you said, you worked at Numerator. There is so much information out there right now where you can look at particular SKUs or product categories and see where they're trending. And so the pace of innovation is hard to wrap one's head around, especially when you're working at a large CPG company, right? And so that's why they end up having to acquire these brands, and they're sort of, in some cases, they're out of touch with where the branding is headed, right? So I'll give one example, like when Hershey acquired Crave, right? So you have a confectionery sweets and snacks business. They acquired a premium jerky company that wasn't their bread and butter. They didn't understand that segment, right?
Yeah.
So they ended up paying a lot for that and integrated under the umbrella of a big CPG, and it absolutely failed. Now, I'm not saying that every single acquisition doesn't work out, but it kind of shows you the culture clash between big CPG and fast-growing, fast-moving, early-stage CPG companies that are able to move, and they understand the audience, their customer, in a way that big CPG they don't. So it'll be interesting to see how this evolves, I do expect that many CPGs, because they have that cash cushion, they have the balance sheet, they will continue to acquire. But I think, and I'm hoping that CPG will get smarter, right, as well, so that it's not just about buying a high growth brand, but really evaluating how this brand fits into the portfolio and the overall strategy of these companies.
So you kind of read my mind on my next question. So if we were sitting in the boardroom of Mondelez, Conagra, General Mills, Campbell Soup, pick one of the really big guys, and you said, I think that you guys, really need to focus on three things as a big CPG. What would you encourage them to do?
Well, I think many of the portfolio products, they haven't really brought innovation. Consumer taste buds are changing so rapidly, right? And so I think what they are doing is, let's say, for example, the Oreo cookie. It's the same product, but they're adding a little, maybe some splash to it, maybe a different kind of flavor to the Oreo. So that's been what I've been seeing for most of these CPG companies, right? Now, what I would advise is really analyzing the consumer data. Where are they going? So you almost like have a heat map of what's happening, what's moving, right? And so this is some of the work that I've been working with the folks at Mondelez, is looking at all the various trends that are impacting food, and then drilling down even more granular to the kind of the micro trend level, and having that as a heat map of where trends are going. Now, it's not to say that, we're seeing this particular SKU rocket up 100%. So, going all in, it's looking at more the short to medium term and seeing how these micro trends will evolve into specific buying patterns for the consumer, right? So, but to answer your question, 3 areas. One, obviously continue to focus on kind of health and wellness, right? And so these are some of the primary ones that they have most have caught on. Others is to look at products that might not be in the traditional sort of like portfolio structure, but add that kind of that unicorn growth, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think consultants can really help, is really kind of identifying the next big product out there, and having a team that's dedicated to understanding what those are. Now, there could be many. There's many within that category, but as a corporate strategy is to have a team or a team of external consultants to help management team evaluate which ones are good. The third, and very quickly, if companies have the balance sheet, is to either build out an internal kind of VC, which Mondelez has done, and other CPG companies, or invest early in some of the more promising. Now, I like that strategy because you're not paying up when you get that, that small of a company. You're not paying up the 10, 15 times EBITDA that normally comes with some of the larger startups. So that's a way to kind of manage a risk. So imagine it's like a stock portfolio, but instead of stocks, you have 20 different high growth, high potential companies that fit with the overall brand strategy of CPG, and then investing in these and watching them, right? Because eventually you don't need to buy 100%, but being an early stage investor in these companies. And I think that will help. It's a defensible strategy. You're lowering the risk profile, but you're also being in tune with where the food economy is headed. And that's what Food Institute does. We look at these trends day in and day out, provide information, provide insights, and work with management teams to figure out, hey, what categories, what specific types of product would be a good investment to, put your resources into.
Brilliant. No, I love it. So just sort of flipping it from the other end of the distribution, if you were talking with major retailers,
Yeah.
what would you say to them?
Now, retailers are tough because their margins are extraordinarily thin, right? So I was at one of the major retailers, I won't say the name, where their head of their food division basically made the statement that their expectation is that they will break even on their on their food items, and so they're looking to increase their revenue on retail media networks.
I knew you were going to say that.
Fuel, right? Gas, right? And other non-food products, right? So margins are incredibly thin right now. So I think retailers really need to be thinking about a couple of things. Cost management, right? Because employees, the employee costs are very high.
Yeah.
We've seen some retailers introduce robots that scan the aisles and do inventory counting, and everything is put up on the cloud. So basically make things more efficient. But the second thing, and I think some of the retailers have done this quite well, is kind of be on the cutting edge of new products, right? So, as they build out their retail media networks, as they build out their content, they're informing consumers of new products, new trends. So they have to get involved in helping to educate their own consumers of what to buy, what not to buy, about health. So, consumers are so strapped throughout. They're stressed at work. They don't want to be thinking. They don't want to be spending a couple hours a day figuring out how they're going to feed themselves and their family. If retailers can take that burden off and say, hey, here are a few options, right? That at a good price point, it's healthy, it's on trend, and you only need to put it in the microwave for 15 minutes and you have a fully prepared meal. Those are some of the things that I would advise these retailers to focus on, right? The second thing is you don't necessarily need a huge store format anymore, right? All that information can be put online and digitized through email campaigns, through website, through videos, and so it helps reduce the burden of a fixed cost for these retailers. So being innovative in store structure, how to use data, how to use technology, and informing the consumers of new up and coming trends and products. If a retailer were to do that for me, I'm like that, I would be a very loyal customer. But as of now, I'm still going to 3 or 4 different retailers in my neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, so it's fascinating. So you remind me of a couple of things. One is we had Paco Underhill on, and yeah, Paco's awesome. And he was sort of making the same point, Brian, like, why are stores not entertaining and educating consumers? Like, make it fun. The grocery store should actually be fun, right? With a lot of opportunity to taste new things, like bring innovation. It's like this. I mean, that's what people love about Costco, right? On the weekend, it's like, hey, try something new. And people they eat lunch by trying all the different stuff. And it's fun. And Costco fills up loads of shopping carts with things people had no intention of buying, but were delighted during their shopping experience because they discovered something new.
Right. So I would say a couple of things. So, and I like your point that retailers need to create an experience, right, for the consumer, right?
Yep.
So, and there's different ways to do that, right? You don't need to have, retailers don't necessarily need to have like a sushi bar, right? So, but it could be a couple of different ways. One is to use technology, right? In the, like Whole Foods is a prime example, right? They're going to be introducing, contactless and cashierless, where, technology where you just walk into the store, pick up your stuff and walk out, right? It's frictionless commerce. They have the capability to do that. They have the money to invest. So that's one way. Another way would be the Aldis and the Lidls of the world, right? I'm not necessarily, when I go to Aldi and Lidl, I'm not looking for them to have, a full, espresso bar. Like, that's not what I go to them because I know that their blueberries, their blackberries are half the cost of anywhere else that I go to, right? So for them, the experience is like, wow, the prices are just amazingly low and it's good quality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not all retailers need to have the same strategy, but it's the perceived value from the consumer. If it's about value, have some knockdown prices on certain items to get people in the door. If it's the Whole Foods, it's the premium. Like, there's different, even their strategy is a little bit different because they really introduce the next wave of like premium, high quality, highly functional foods that you normally can't get at other retailers. So the experience is more about the variety and the quality. So, going back to, just to close up on the conversation, retailers, is that there are many different strategies. Find out what their audience is and create that experience that will get them in the store.
So I was recently traveling, and there was effectively an open air, food market, and on Tuesdays and Fridays they combined two things that are really smart, which was premiumization and scarcity.
Right.
And so they bake fresh bakery products only on Tuesdays and Fridays.
Right.
So, dude, I'm telling you, the line to get into the place, so it opens at 9, and at 8:30 or earlier, like, people are queuing up to get into this place. And then if you're there by 9:15, it's gone. Right. So it's like they make an event out of this. It's really, 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 really good. And it's like there are retailers that would die for that level of loyalty.
Right.
Like, because to me, loyalty is about like how much are you willing to like go out, how much friction are you actually willing to put up with to get what you want. And like, I'm happy to stand in line with all these other people because I know that what I'm going to get is really, really good, and I can't get it all the time. So when it is available, I want to go get it. So I think, this is not some, 2,000 outlet chain. This is like one of one. And I think that they could teach some really big retailers a couple marketing and merchandising lessons.
Yeah, being creative is definitely a high competitive advantage now, right? And I'll give one example is, so I live in New Jersey, and I think I may have shared this with you. American Dream, that monstrosity of a retail a retail mall, like, it's just massive, right? And recently, so this was back in September of 2022, I think October, Mr. Beast, William Dalton, opened his first Mr. Beast burger concept, and through the announcement, he packed out American Dream Mall. There are some pictures online. You could see the amount of excitement around this one burger concept, which, it's a burger, right? It's decent. Is it the greatest burger that I've tasted? No, but he created that brand for himself and was able to drive traffic exponentially from his one store to the entire mall, right? And it's just, it's like even that can be a major driving force of transactions for retailers, for manufacturers, being creative with how, even using influencers, like a Mr. Beast. There are many different ways to do that. But I would emphasize that, companies really need to be thinking about their own content and, and being, and making sure it reaches the intended audience in creative ways, right? Yeah. This is not pre-COVID anymore. We're in a new era of content, and many companies that are behind the curve are using traditional models of of marketing, it's not going to work. They're going to be left behind, right? So I can't stress enough how important it is to have a very thoughtful, intentional content strategy platform, and using that to the advantage to drive foot traffic in the stores, or purchases at the stores.
Well, you mentioned retail media networks earlier, and that
Absolutely.
clearly is like, at least for the big guys, where they're going, and definitely seeing major shifts in marketing and trade spend dollars.
Absolutely.
Going to that, because they can draw a much shorter, straighter line to results.
Yep.
But again, it's more than just ad placement on a web page. There's so much creativity that's available, and to allow both the brand and the retailer, to tell a story, engage a consumer, delight the consumer. There's just a lot of opportunity there, that if people get creative, which is what they get paid a lot of money to be, that there's a lot of opportunity there. I want to start to transition the conversation to the career side of things for just a minute. But is there anything that just like, oh my gosh, Bob, I can't believe we didn't get to talk about X. This is such a big deal.
One thing I would just want to emphasize a point is that, when I mentioned that we're in a new era, so when I look at 2008 to pre-COVID, that was a period where, companies really didn't need to change. Everything was kind of like humming around, along pretty nicely, right? A lot of the leaders that rose up through the ranks during that time period, they're now leading these companies, but they've never really been challenged in periods like we are now.
Yeah.
And so leaders of food and beverage businesses in this next season, what worked before is not going to work in this time period. And so really think about, my advice is to really think about innovation, being creative, and there's multiple different ways to kind of go about it. But I just wanted to emphasize that a new type of leadership and strategic leadership is needed now, right? And so that's something that, for me, advising, companies and working with strategic foresight teams and insight teams, like that's something that that I, and even, in Hunter, our friend Hunter Thurman, we help these companies think through the right steps to get to that point. So anyways, I just wanted to make that one point.
Okay, no, I think it's a great point that you're making. So moving on, and that was awesome, by the way. Like I love getting the benefit of your expertise, so thank you. And kind of transition into the career part as we kind of start to bring this home a little bit. We talked a couple of times that you've had a nonlinear career. Yeah. You didn't grow up in the media business,
nope.
Right? You didn't grow up, at a CPG,
nope.
Right? You grew up more on sort of the deal making side of a lot of this.
Correct.
And first question I would ask is, how do you think that's benefited you as you stepped into the role that you've got at Food Institute?
Yeah, the hard skills that I learned through, financial modeling, reading a balance sheet, right? Building relationships with senior leaders of like that's what I learned, at Goldman, at Lehman, and consulting and private equity, right? Yeah. I couldn't have learned those skills outside of those, those roles. So that really helped set the stage to where I am now, right? And so I would say that even before I worked on Wall Street, I knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like my personality is one of an entrepreneur. Like I never, even within the first 3 months of working at Goldman Sachs, I looked at my bosses and the partners of my division, and I was like, I have no desire to like go down that path, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, but for me, I never aspired to be a partner at XYZ company, investment bank, or private equity firm. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. So, but I went through that I took the 15 years, right, in these different roles to learn what I needed to learn, right? So that when I acquired the Food Institute, okay, I had a wealth of experience and knowledge to be able to execute what I wanted to do. I'm more of on the creative side, if you can tell, Bob. Like my mind's always turning, right? It drives my wife crazy because even on weekends, I'm like, hey, what? I have a new idea, right? And so my mind's always turning. So that's the way I operate. And so being in a media environment, it allows me to use that creativity and the passion of being an entrepreneur and my passion for media and content. And that's really it. I'm someone where, I can, I went through the internet bubble in 2001. There you go. The great financial crisis where I worked at Lehman Brothers and my entire team got wiped out.
Oof.
And now, and so I've been through these cycles of really, I wouldn't say traumatic, but really acute kind of like stops in my career. And I was able to thrive through, even during COVID. I remember when I acquired January of 2020, COVID hits. My daughter is born the next month in February 2020. And then the world shuts down, right? And so, but that forced me to really think about how to pivot and change. Food Institute is not, today's Food Institute is very different than it was when I acquired it. The entire culture has changed. Our growth strategy has changed. All that happened in the past 3 years. And so I learned a lot about like that I'm able to be in an environment, in any environment, and thrive. Yeah. Like I had to kind of learn that by going through these periods of at these jobs, and so bringing it back to the career side is I think having a diverse sort of work experience, whether you work at one or two or three, that can only help because you learn about how people tick, how teams grow, what works, what doesn't work. All of that is valuable experience that you can take to your next role, right? Whether you want to be an entrepreneur or whether you want to stay in your current industry, right? So variety is something I think is something that I would encourage because you could take those experiences to the next position.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really strong. Two things sort of strike me. One is that variety is good because it brings just seeing the world from different perspectives, seeing different things and going, oh, this reminds me of something that might sound very non-contiguous to what we're talking about, but actually is pretty analogous to what we're talking about. But the other thing I was going to say just quickly is all the Goldman consulting, PE stuff, you learn the business of business.
Right.
You learn the business of business. And so that's why you're able to be in situations. And so it's so funny because this is like the complete other end of the spectrum, but my degree was in finance. Right. And I'm so glad that it was because that's the lingua franca of business is like numbers and like, what is a balance sheet and an income statement, and what does all this stuff even mean? And if you don't understand the scorecard for business, then that's a gigantic disadvantage of playing a game that you don't understand what the rules are and why decisions are made the way that they're made. So I think that's really, really cool. One other thing, again, I'm mindful of the time here a little bit because I'm loving our conversation. As you've built teams and as you're building out the culture at Food Institute, what are the kind of attributes, the talent attributes that you're like, ooh, I'm really going to enjoy working with this person? Or like, I don't think so. That's probably not going to be a great fit.
Yeah, I think for me, as we're still a growing company, we're a small company, but we're growing quite rapidly, is I've come across quite a few applicants that have pristine resumes. Like, there's one, that applied, Harvard Business School grad, worked at many, blue chip companies, and I tried working, with this person, and just, they couldn't shift their thinking, right? Because for them, they were trained a certain way, and they have a certain outlook on how they view situations, and it's like they're not malleable.
Yes.
There's another, one of the other journalists that we worked with in the past, and he basically lasted 2 months, and he worked at a very reputable media company, senior guy, loved what we were doing. We put him in the position. He absolutely flopped because he couldn't shift and quick think quick on his feet on how to shift when things needed to shift, right? And so, but this past week, I interviewed another guy, and he came from a non-entrepreneur's background, right? So again, similar to he come from a non-traditional background. He scaled businesses on his own. He actually sold his first company, worked on another kind of growth equity type of company, helped build that business, and he's looking for his third gig. That's and cool. It was a breath of fresh air because I'd be talking about him. I laid out the vision of what I want to do with Food Institute. He came back and said, I could help you with X, Y, and Z. And he's like, let's go. And it wasn't like I didn't need to lay out his direct career path for him. He was a self-starter. He had the experience of growing teams, and he already knew my mindset, so I didn't have to handhold him. He already knows what to do, and so that is rare. Like for me, having a person like that is very rare to find because I don't think it's about age. I don't think it's about culture. It's about a mindset, right? And that mindset of innovation, of thinking strategically, not just tactically. There's a huge difference, right? Yeah. Thinking strategically of where things are going, and having and being able to synthesize vast amounts of information, right, to come up with a strategy that is different and unique. That is a hidden gem, that I think I wish more employees had, right?
I'd like to make
most people don't like their jobs. You ask 70% of folks, they do not like what they're doing, right? So that only leaves 30% that really enjoy what they're doing.
Yes.
And yeah, it's difficult. So, I would say, hopefully that answers your question, Bob, but that is, it's intangible, but that, I could find that in someone who just graduated college, or I could find it in that characteristic in an experienced executive, right? It's not like, it's agnostic based on race, age, background, right? And that mindset, I think is something for me is like, it's a breath of fresh air.
So completely agree. Love it. One point that I really want to highlight for listeners that you were saying that this candidate brought to you. Yeah, there's a strategic thinking part of it, and not everybody has that skill set, right? I mean, if you go do strength finders, not everybody's going to have as one of their top 5 strengths, that they're a strategic thinker. That is a different breed, and you sort of get what you get from heaven. And that's, if you got it, you got it. But what you were describing in the interview, where the person was helping you basically visualize what it would be like for them to work there, because as you laid out the vision, if I heard you right, you laid out the vision, and I said, well, gosh, Brian, based on that, I know I can help you do this. I know I can help you do that. And I know I can help you do the third thing. hiring by its very nature is a risky business. You talked about the guy with the, in theory, great pedigree who flamed out after 2 months, right? That's exactly what we're trying to prevent, is that scenario.
Right.
But then you've got this other person who comes from a air quote non-traditional background who nailed it with you because one, they listened, they understood what you were talking about, and in the moment were able to help you visualize what it would be like if they were on your team contributing. And what we see so often, what we try and teach our clients at Career Club is when they're interviewing how to do exactly that. Is like, don't just give the rote answer to the rote question and just be like everybody else who made it that far in the interview process. Show why you're different. Get the person excited about you, right? And to bring an appropriate level of confidence, but confidence that's grounded in truth, not like trying to BS your way to the front of the line, but like, no, this is really me. This is how I really think. Having the confidence to say, like, here's how I think that I might be able to contribute based on what you're sharing with me, Brian. And what we say is confidence is contagious. When you believe, you make me believe. And at the end of the day, people hire people.
Absolutely. Sorry for interrupting. Like the person that comes to mind, and I bring his name up quite frequently because I love his passion. And you talk about being contagious. So Steve Irwin, right? The crocodile hunter. Like I couldn't care less about crocodiles, but when I watched Steve Irwin, he got me excited about crocodiles. I would start watching YouTube videos, right? It's rare to find someone with that type of passion, right? And creativity. And so, and so you're spot on. It's getting people excited about who you are as an applicant for a specific role, and being authentic in a way. You're not trying to be somebody else or fit the mold. People don't want, people can see right through it. I could tell within 2 minutes of an interview whether somebody is BSing or not. All right.
Most people can.
So so that passion is something that is really important. I think not just for a particular employer, but even for that employee's long-term career path. You have to find what you're good at, what you're passionate about. And that's something that's not just about grades. Like, ask the people around you, right? Ask your family members and friends what you're good at, and to ask them to be objective and truthful, right? But yeah, I just wanted to mention Seaworm because every time I think about someone who's so passionate that it's contagious, his face comes to my mind.
No, that's awesome. That's good branding on Steve Irwin's part. Well, we're at the bottom of the hour, so I want to be very respectful of your time and the listeners' time. Having said that, is there anything on career stuff that anything that you might want to leave us with, or did we cover it?
Last thing I would say, meet a lot of people, network, reach out to people on LinkedIn, talk to as many people, right? I think, in this COVID time where everyone's kind of hunkering down in their own kind of man caves or woman caves, like it's easy to kind of get into that mindset where you don't want to interact. But, for me, I make it a point, even though I'm an introvert by nature, to go out and meet people, talk to people. I probably have like 10 calls a week with new folks that I've never interacted with, right? And so that could only help building the network, and maybe that will spark, those conversations will spark, a direction where that might be your next gig. So you never know.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Brian, thank you so much for everything that you shared, both on Food Institute and food and beverage topics, and then here in this last part about career. I love it. Like I said, I could go another hour easy with you, and I know that we would have fun. But with that, I'm very appreciative of your time. Thank you. Wish you the best of success. Looks like you're crushing it and continue to crush it at Food Institute. And thank you for everything that you're doing for the industry.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks for the opportunity to come on your program.
Awesome. Awesome. And for folks who are listening, please make sure next few weeks we've got Dory Clark coming on. Dory is a rock star. She's a professor at Harvard, or Columbia and Duke. Has a podcast on Newsweek. She's awesome. We've got Katie George, Chief People Officer for McKinsey, is coming on in a couple of weeks. Eric Kershot, who runs the HR Hot Seat, is a major thought leader in the wacky world of HR. So with all that, we've got some great episodes coming up. Thank you for listening and appreciate everyone's time. Have a great rest of your week. Thanks. I know